Good morning. Welcome to another broadcast day on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, a private not-for-profit organization. Radio Reading volunteers broadcast daily readings of newspapers, magazines, and books to area blind and handicapped persons who are provided reading radios. We broadcast on the subcarrier signal at WNET-FM Radio Buffalo, and that's provided without charge for the Western New York Public Broadcasting Association. As always, please stay with us. Our reading the Buffalo News is going to be coming up in just a moment.
The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or another print disability that makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org. Your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for today, Tuesday, August the 4th. Your readers today are Lori and
Lita.
Let's look at the weather. Mostly sunny today, thank goodness, with a high of 82, and mainly clear tonight with a low of 62. Clouds and sun tomorrow with a high of 86. Thursday, mostly cloudy most of the time with a couple of showers and a thunderstorm. That means it's going to be humid. Storms can also bring flooding, downpours, and localized damaging wind gusts with a high of 83. Friday, you're looking at a high of 82 with stray thunderstorms, humid. Thunderstorms will be around on Saturday with a high of 80, and they will also be around on Sunday with a high of 84. You're looking for sunshine and humidity, though, to start Monday with a high of 81. If you are not warm enough, go to Needles, California. It was 110 yesterday. And if you want to be cooler, Stanley, Idaho, just 29 degrees.
Ooh.
The air quality is good today, and there are no particles. It's mainly ozone that's the offender. The sun sets at 8:33 p.m., and the pollen, in case your nose is wondering, was moderate yesterday, and it's moderate today. The lakes, Erie and the Niagara River, are 73 degrees, and Ontario is a chilly 68. On to you, Lita.
Thank you very much, Lori. And Hochul's nuclear plan is starting to gather steam. Just over a year ago, Governor Kathy Hochul unveiled plans to add at least 1 gigawatt of advanced nuclear power in upstate New York. The goal was to create a new source of power generation to meet rising demand for electricity. The project was portrayed as an economic boon for the community chosen to host it as well. More than a year later, the opening of such a new facility is still years away, but the project continues to advance through the early stages. Still to be determined is where the plant will be built and what type of nuclear technology will be used. Justin Driscoll, the president and CEO of the New York Power Authority, which is directing the project, said those answers could come within months. We're pointing towards selecting a host community and a technology by the end of the year. As for which company would build the facility, Driscoll said there is ample interest on that front. We've heard from almost everybody in this business, he said. For all of the momentum behind adding nuclear power, not everyone wants to see the project come to fruition. Anti-nuclear activists see more nuclear energy as costly and a threat to the environment. Here's a look at where things stand. When the Power Authority invited upstate communities to express interest in hosting a facility, 8 submitted formal responses. The only one of those responses from Western New York was Dunkirk. With power generation comes economic development, said Vince DeJoy, Dunkirk's Director of Planning and Development, and I think that's the biggest benefit to the city. Dunkirk says the shutdown of the NRG energy plant a decade ago led to the loss of 40% of the city's tax base. That's a lot. The city, Chautauqua County, and other partners who support the idea of bringing a nuclear facility to Dunkirk view the project as an engine of economic revival. We feel there would be corresponding economic developments in jobs and housing, just all the good things that come with nuclear generation, DeJoy said. NRG recently sold its Dunkirk site to Genover, a Texas-based developer specializing in repurposing long-time industrial properties. At this stage, our focus is on remediation of the property and on transferring the permits associated with it, which is proving to be a full task in its own right, said Martin Din. That work is where our attention is. We are weighing all of our options, including nuclear, for the site. and we are not in a position to speculate on longer-term uses beyond that. Oswego and Wayne counties have also expressed interest in hosting the new nuclear facility, and those communities are home to the state's active nuclear power facilities along Lake Ontario. In recent remarks, Hochul said she feels good about how the nuclear initiative is progressing, especially amid concerns about high energy prices. I'm very focused on creating more power, she said. Nuclear is a cornerstone of it. Hochul said she has been communicating about the project with federal officials who are pushing to expand nuclear power generation in the United States. I want this to happen, and it has to happen soon, she said. And there's no reason why it takes 10 years, which has always been the runway, we're told, which is why it discourages people from doing it. New York State has established a partnership with the province of Ontario to share best practices about nuclear power, technical expertise, and lessons learned. Ontario is building the province's first small modular reactor, or SMR, capable of producing 300 megawatts of electricity at its Darlington Nuclear Generation Station east of Toronto. A total of 4 SMRs are planned for the site. Hochul said she is mindful of nuclear projects, such as one in Georgia, that was beset by years of delays and massive cost overruns. I'm working hard to make sure that we don't get sucked up into those high costs either, she said. There's a smart way to do it, and so I'm looking at everything that's happened before. Opponents call the push for more nuclear power in New York State misguided. They see nuclear power as environmentally hazardous and costly. The governor has claimed she's trying to make energy more affordable for New Yorkers, but her new nuclear plan would have New Yorkers, ratepayers, footing the bill with our tax dollars, with the health of our communities and with our lives, said Stacey Van Blarcombe, a community organizer with PUSH, and we won't stand for it. Instead of pouring resources into more nuclear energy, the state should prioritize renewable energy, energy efficiency, grid modernization, and community-based climate solutions that can be deployed faster, more affordably, and without creating dangerous radioactive waste. Diane Serchik, vice chair of the Sierra Club Niagara Group, said the state should instead focus on developing more wind, solar, and battery storage to help address its energy needs. We advocate for accelerating efforts to deploy proven renewable energy solutions, backed up by energy storage and efficiency measures to meet necessary climate targets and reduce greenhouse gas emissions quickly enough to save a habitable climate. With Hochul demonstrating a firm commitment to more nuclear energy, how do opponents expect to stop the initiative from moving forward? Well, I'm a believer that she answers to the voters, and she's going to see reasons, Serchik said. This is an expensive proposition, and right now we're talking about basically a technology, SMRs, that are unproven. And what we do know about nuclear energy is that it takes a long time. DeJoy, the Dunkirk's planning official, said he believes the city would be a good fit for a nuclear power project, but he acknowledged not everyone in that community may be receptive to the idea. DeJoy asked opponents to keep their minds open and to listen to experts. We're not just bringing in experts to Dunkirk from the companies that want to build these. Building a foundation. Well, the Power Authority has assembled a leadership team to guide the nuclear initiative, including Todd Jaskowski, a senior vice president of nuclear development. In a previous job with Ontario Power Generation, he helped lead the refurbishment of the Darlington Nuclear Generation Station. Leaders of the state's initiative are evaluating what type of nuclear technology is the best choice for upstate, either the traditional large reactor, as the state already has, or SMRs. Obviously, the site has to be suitable to the technology, so you can't have one without the other. The state has announced $40 million in workforce development funding over the course of 4 years, aimed at creating a workforce to support the nuclear industry. The ultimate goal is to create a pathway for jobs for New Yorkers across a really wide variety of skills. The applicants for the workforce funding could be technical schools, college unions, manufacturers, and community groups. Lots of skilled trade workers will be needed to build a nuclear facility. Further down the line, workers with a range of skills will be needed to operate the plant. I'm seeing a lot of positive momentum at the state level and across all agencies, and also at the federal level.
And Roswell Park climbs in the list of top U.S. cancer hospitals. Roswell Park Comprehensive Cancer Center has climbed to its highest ranking in several years in the annual U.S. News and World Report listing of the country's top cancer hospitals. In the publication's 26-27 rankings released Tuesday, Roswell Park was graded as the nation's 17th best cancer hospital. That's one spot ahead of Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles and one spot below Cleveland Clinic. After falling out of the top 50 for 3 straight years, from 22 to 24, Roswell Park returned to the list last year, tying Advent Health Orlando as the nation's 30th best cancer hospital. The Buffalo Cancer Center has historically been a mainstay in the top 50, and it peaked as high as number 14 in 2020 and 2019. We're proud of our record of consistently exceptional care and services, and of the incredible Roswell Park team, which continues to stand out even among our national peers, Roswell Park President and CEO Candace Johnson said in a statement to the Buffalo News. We hold ourselves to a high standard because of the trust our patients and our community place in us, and because we know how important it is for everyone to have access to outstanding, comprehensive, patient-centered care close to home, she said. Roswell Park, like other hospitals, has a love-hate relationship with those rankings. When the rankings are favorable, hospitals use them to recruit talent and to market to patients, often touting the results in advertisements on TV, on the sides of buses, or even at airport terminals. When the rankings don't go so well, hospitals tend to downplay, discredit, or ignore those lists. For example, after Roswell Park missed the top 50 for the second straight year in 23, Johnson sent an email to employees that said the process U.S. News and World Report uses to build this feature is surrounded by significant and well-founded questions and criticism. Johnson added that the methodology favored cancer centers in large cities and those with a high percentage of patients that are on traditional Medicare. In an interview last year, when Roswell Park returned to the top 50, U.S. News and World Report told the News that data remained rooted in traditional Medicare patients, though the publication did make changes to account for patients with Medicare Advantage plans. For the 26-27 rankings that were released Tuesday, the publication's methodology put increased importance on objective, verifiable patient outcomes, said Chelsea Wen, senior health data analyst. Roswell Park displayed top-tier performance on those outcomes, which is what I would be most importantly interested in, such as survival and patient discharges to home, said Wen, noting that those factors helped Roswell Park rise to number 17.
Impressive.
Navigating challenges. Even as Roswell Park performs well in cancer outcomes, the Buffalo institution is navigating financial challenges and looking to fortify its long-term outlook. As the news reported last month, Roswell Park retained Chicago-based Kaufman Hall, a healthcare advisory firm, for a 4-month engagement. That engagement began in May, with Kaufman Hall expected to provide reports to the board's finance committee over the summer and the fall. Roswell Park continues to see more patients and grow its revenue, but expenses such as wages, benefits, and supplies are piling up faster. For the fiscal year that ended March 31st, the Cancer Center recorded an operating loss of $69.8 million on operating revenues that were about $1.35 billion, according to its audited financial statements that were released in July. When factoring in non-operating revenues and expenses, Roswell Park logged a deficit of more than $63 million for that year that ended March 31st. That was the Cancer Center's 3rd straight year with a deficit, following a $57 million deficit in 25 and more than $54 million in 24. It posted a surplus of nearly $8 million for the year that ended in 23, according to its annual reports. It appears Roswell Park also is looking for 2 new executive-level leaders. The Cancer Center currently has job postings listed online for Chief Nursing Officer and Chief Financial Officer. And Roswell Park's head of recruitment recently posted on LinkedIn to promote the search for a new chief financial officer who will be responsible for leading financial strategy, and that person will report directly to Johnson. Current Chief Financial Officer Ryan Grady decided to make a career change and is leaving Roswell Park in September for a role with a global consulting firm. Buffalo General gets recognition. The best hospital rankings break down hospitals nationally by state, by metro area, and by specialty. In New York State, the top 27 general acute care hospitals were ranked, and just one of those was from the Buffalo metro area. Kaleido Health's flagship, Buffalo General Medical Center, was ranked as the 23rd best hospital in the state. Buffalo General was ranked as high, performing in 10 procedures and conditions: aortic valve repair, COPD, gynecological cancer surgery, heart attacks, heart bypass surgery, heart failure, hip replacement, lung cancer surgery, pacemaker implantation, and strokes. And on to you, Rita.
I'm going there to have my hip done.
Are you? What time is it, though?
Well, you know what time it is? First of all, I'm going to tell you, you're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. And the time, as you ask, is 16 minutes past the hour. And here's something. Erie County has ended its long run as Bills stadium owner with transferring to the state. Since the Buffalo Bills began playing in 1960, their home stadiums have always been owned by local governments. First, the city of Buffalo, and beginning with the opening of the old stadium in Orchard Park in 1973, Erie County. But that long-standing arrangement has changed. On Friday, Erie County signed paperwork transferring ownership of the new Highmark Stadium to New York State. The transfer of the new Highmark Stadium campus to the state should come as a financial relief to Erie County, but some also find it bittersweet. Today's ownership transfer caps off a significant series of events that resulted in the construction of a state-of-the-art facility. As a result, for the first time since 1973, Erie County is no longer in the stadium ownership business, said Erie County Executive Mark Poloncarz. The historic investment made in our community is complete, and as fans of the Buffalo Bills, we can all look forward to enjoying football games and other events at the brand new 60,000-seat stadium, he added. The state is technically paying $1 for the Bills stadium complex, though its actual contribution is the $600 million it agreed to pay toward new stadium construction as part of a three-way lease agreement with the county and the Bills. Poloncarz said when the deal was struck that he looked forward to the county getting out of the stadium business for good. The transfer marks the end of a long era of local investment and ownership, beginning with the Bills' first home field at War Memorial Stadium, aka the Rock Pile, in the city of Buffalo. At that time, the stadium was owned by the city and started out with seating for fewer than 37,000 people. For the 73 season, the team moved to Orchard Park, where Bills fans watched home games for more than 50 years. Originally as known as Rich Stadium, ownership transferred to the county. County ownership remained in place as Rich Stadium became Ralph Wilson Stadium, then New Era Field. Briefly, the facility was known as Bill Stadium before Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield of Western New York purchased the naming rights in 2021 and carried the name forward to the new stadium.
All right. Let's look at my view. Modern technology isn't always good. And this is by Kurt Lawrence of Grand Island, who's had it with updated technology. Anybody get a new washer or dryer lately?
Yeah.
My mother taught me how to do the laundry when I was young. That consisted of separate the darks from the lights, throw a pile of clothes in, add detergent, push a button, you're done. It's not as easy as that now. First, you have to decide on one of 12 settings, then a subset of 12 more. Then press and hold an indicator button till it clicks. Now the top is locked down, so you can't even add that pair of socks you dropped when you put everything else in. Is this machine easier to use? Definitely not. Do the clothes end up cleaner? I don't think so. The new dryers are just as bad. Now there's sense control. What is it sensing? If it's my underwear, it'll just stop and leave my jeans wet. How about I just throw the clothes in and set it for 45 minutes? There's probably a way to do that, but I can't figure it out. What are they doing to us with these new appliances? We recently purchased a new stove, and it literally took me 15 minutes to just set the clock. I wanted to bake some Brussels sprouts. Do you bake Brussels sprouts? Well, do I want to air bake or regular bake? I have no idea what the difference is. Do I want to remote start? Say I want to steam some broccoli on the stovetop. Do I want to use the dual max element? I just want to boil the water. New cars are the worst. I have satellite radio. With my old vehicle, I'd get in, start it up, and whatever station I was listening to when I last shut it off would come on. Now, when I turn the car on, I have to hit the media icon, find out where Play Sirius is on the screen, then retune to the station that I want. This is after stopping the system from connecting to Apple Play on my phone. How about when you get your oil changed and the mechanic forgets to reset the alert indicator? You ever try to fix it, but you accidentally get into something else that you can't get out of? I'm not the mechanic. I don't need to adjust my vehicle diagnostics or my drive power distribution. I just want my speedometer back so I don't drive too fast and get a ticket if I'm driving with one hand. The screen tells me to use two hands on the wheel. If I continue to use one hand, it suggests I'm tired and need a coffee break. These companies think they are making things better for us, but I just find they're making life tedious. I just read that Mercedes-Benz is now offering models that will not have these digital touchscreens. Their controls will consist of all dials and slide switches. So here's a company that usually gives their customers the best of everything, but through surveys they've found out that many of them have had it with all of the gadgets. I think this whole thing got started by businesses wanting to make products that are more modern and safer. We thought, wow, I can't believe this does that. But this evolved into, how can I make my product different than the next guy's? This led to companies just adding systems to use as selling features, not necessarily improving them. In a lot of instances, it just basically made many products more confusing and just harder to use. Sometimes, new technology just gets out of control. It's supposed to make life easier, not more difficult. What do you think, Lita?
I kind of agree with them sometimes. That's true. Okay, so the editorial cartoon, I am assuming, is the Secretary of Defense, and he's standing there holding a graph with a red arrow pointing down to the depths of hell. And it says, "Sir, our stockpiles are low." And on the other side is Donald Trump, who, again, we agree is getting fatter in every cartoon. And in the background are all his trophies. And he's holding up a chart that says contractor shares with a nice green arrow pointing up towards the sky. And he's thinking in his head, not speaking out loud, who cares as long as my stockpile is going up? And from the editorial from the Buffalo News, rule of the road. Regulation and education should be combined to maintain e-bike safety. Last week's fatal crash involving an e-bike rider in the town of Tonawanda underscores the broader safety challenges surrounding these faster bikes. State law establishes an important framework, but local communities should have the flexibility to combine sensible regulation, education, and infrastructure improvements that reflect their own streets, parks, and trails. On Thursday, 46-year-old Buffalo resident Wilfredo Morales died in a collision between a sedan and the e-bike he was riding. The investigation is ongoing. As recently reported in the news, hospital admissions for e-bike related injuries are expected to double or triple this year at Golisano Children's Hospital, according to Kaleida health officials. The booming popularity of e-bikes has spurred some towns to implement speed and, in some cases, where these devices speed restrictions must be something, or limits, and in some cases you don't want them speeding faster, where these devices may operate. On the other side of the argument are people who enjoy riding their e-bikes and do so responsibly. They feel that they are being punished when localities implement more restrictions than are set out under state law. Having said that, there's also enough evidence of accidents and injuries to warrant targeted regulations where needed. Take, for example, the Tonawanda Common Council. As news reporters Emma Kresge and Stephen Watson recently reported the Tonawanda Common Council lowered the speed limit for cyclists in Niawanda Park to 5 miles per hour. People run faster than that. They also set broad new regulations on electric bikes and scooters in the city. But if they say 5, people go 10. The question is whether
What
lowering...
about people who are riding a non-electric bike?
That they do the same thing.
They can do 10 miles
That's
per hour.
right. But there is more bulk and weight to a e-bike. But we digress. The question is whether lowering the speed limit is enforceable or fair. One pro e-biker rider who rides his electric bike in Niawanda Park thinks 5 miles per hour would be ridiculous. Whether a 5 mile per hour limit is practical remains open to debate. Some operators maintain they would struggle to maintain that speed. A more practical compromise might be variable speed limits or lower limits during the busiest hours when families and pedestrians crowd the trail. Regulation should be practical enough so that the public complies and should not appear arbitrary. One walker along Niawanda's bike path interviewed by the news suggested dedicate bike lanes, an idea worth serious consideration. Where space allows, separating cyclists and pedestrians may reduce conflicts more effectively than speed limits alone. While many older people are purchasing e-bikes for their own use, there are also many underage riders, and state law says e-bike and e-scooter riders must be at least 16 years of age. East Aurora and Clarence passed new regulations for electric bicycles and scooters last year, along with allowing police to impound the devices and fine the parents of underage riders. This expensive inconvenience for rule breakers could make an impact. Enforcement remains one of the biggest challenges. Police departments are understandably reluctant to pursue high-speed riders, particularly on trails or residential streets, where a chase could create even greater danger. North Tonawanda Mayor Austin Tylick offered perhaps the most practical observation. Echoed by East Aurora Police Chief Patrick Welch, Tylick argued that educating young riders may have a greater long-term impact than simply writing citations. Electric cycles and e-scooters provide valuable transportation for those who cannot drive because of advanced age, disability, or other circumstances. But issues arise when people operating these devices pay no attention to the rules and regulations, putting themselves and others in danger. The goal should not be to make e-bikes harder to own or use. It should be to ensure they can be ridden safely by responsible operators while protecting everyone who shares the road and trail. Doing so requires sensible local regulations, realistic enforcement, better ride education, and where possible, infrastructure that separates fast-moving bikes from pedestrians.
You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time, 28 minutes after the hour. And in another voice, William O'Neill White says Buffalo Public Schools need to address DEI. As I begin to speak for my allotted 3 minutes to the Buffalo Board of Education to protest cuts to diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in the district, I had the distinct feeling that none of them were listening. Some gave distracted smiles while others were visibly checking their phones. I implored the district to reconsider its financial cuts to programs like the Culturally and Linguistically Relevant Initiatives, CLRI. I told the board members and Superintendent Pascal Mubenga that the district was falling in line with a disturbing nationwide trend of defunding DEI initiatives and heading in the wrong direction. The board went on to unanimously pass that budget. 2 months later, and we are paying the price. BPS recently announced that Mubenga was immediately resigning as superintendent. More information was later released by the CLRI chief, Antoinette Amos, alleging sexual assault and retaliation by both Mubenga and board member Mookie Hawkins. In addition to those resignations, we may see a vote of no confidence in the school board from the teachers union. What the district and the board has failed to understand is that dismantling DEI will come back to haunt us. Equity isn't just about race. It's about confronting power imbalances that lead to real harm. Abuse by school administrators has continued to be normalized. In my first year teaching at charter school in Buffalo, the principal abruptly resigned because of an inappropriate relationship with a young teacher. According to the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, 38% of all women have reported experiencing sexual harassment at work. Many who do report problematic behavior often face the threat of retaliation. The BPS community, especially the children, will now have to foot the bill for the board's failure to address equity. Resources that could have gone to kids, teachers, and programs like CLRI will be going to legal bills and hefty settlements for victims, justifiably. In the search for a new superintendent and replacement board members, BPS should put DEI as a top priority for funding, because if we don't pay for it now, we will certainly pay later.
And from Jackie Combs, Trump still playing a role that made him a reality TV star. For 14 seasons, right up to his first run for president, Donald Trump was the star of his own reality show, The Apprentice, and then The Celebrity Apprentice. The show stopped, but Trump, as president, is still creating his own reality. When so many Americans say they've tuned him out, the metaphor is apt. In the increasingly warped world in which the showrunner president appears to dwell, he inherited messes and created the best economy in history. Trump took a country that was in international laughingstock and made it respected again. He won election 3 times, and he said yet again at the last month's White House Correspondents Association dinner. But the second was rigged against him, so brave patriots revolted on the 6th of January in 2021. They were ultimately foiled and then unfairly prosecuted and convicted, only to have superhero Trump return to dispense clemency and spring the freedom fighters on his first day back in office. Daily, on matters big and small, the president just makes things up. The botched makeover of the reflecting pool was the work of vandals with box cutters, neither of which has been found, not mistakes by Trump's no-bid contractors. He ended 8 wars, or is it 10 now, but was unjustly denied a Nobel Peace Prize. Then he started a Mideast war. Never mind that he'd promised voters he would never do so, but good news, he quickly won it, though strikes and counterstrikes and deaths continue. What's left is just a skirmish against Iran. Trump dismissively told a crowd in Georgia recently, just days after 4 service members were killed in Jordan and Iraq. Rarely, however, has Trump recasting of reality to fit his chosen narrative been so evident on various fronts and grotesque as in recent days. A day after the Georgia rally, the Pentagon was found to have fudged the war casualty numbers on its website, subtracting the latest 4 deaths from its official count and seemingly minimizing the death toll in Trump's war, not a war. Amid an outcry, the so-called War Department restored the 4 soldiers' deaths, but in a separate, unexplained category. The department also acknowledged a much higher number of wounded troops. Trump, in true showbiz style, is quick to take a liking to people from central casting. And so it is that the wholly incompetent Pete Hegseth, the former Fox News celebrity who tries so hard to give high-tea energy, is in charge of the Pentagon. He knows it's his job to make Trump look good. Facts be damned. Recall that in March, just after Trump started the war on Iran, Hegseth assailed the media for harping on the deaths of 6 service members in Kuwait to make the president look bad. The Pentagon's wretched scripting of Iran's war's casualty count came just after Trump posthumously put words in the mouths of the 4 most recently killed soldiers. He claimed to reporters, all of them said very strongly, we cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon, which amazingly just happened to echo Trump's oft-stated rationale for his war. Who does things like that? Trump, of course. His many stories of what favorable things people supposedly say to him are likely fictitious as well, but they don't involve slain men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice and can no longer speak for themselves, including to refute the president. In a different way, tragically, Trump lately has escalated his second term rewriting of American history to fit his celebratory no warts at all version. He doesn't see that Americans can celebrate the nation's history even as they acknowledge the period of enslavement, Jim Crow, women's long wait for a vote, military failures, and much more. Most citizens recognize that the perpetual efforts to right such wrongs, their own efforts and those of citizens long before them, truly are what make America great. What Trump sees instead is people who hate their country, and he says so. Last month, he signed an executive order calling for signs to be installed outside the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of American History, warning that the museum I've visited dozens of times since I was a preteen doesn't accurately reflect U.S. history. Someday soon, I'm confident Trump's signs will themselves be history, just like the ones that read whites only, or no Irish need apply. Another shameful prop proudly discarded. Trump has targeted the Smithsonian, a national treasure, since regaining office. After a first executive order last year demanded removal of improper ideology from its many museums, some material was removed or changed, including references to Trump's impeachments.
The culmination of his scriptwriter's work was the 162-page, perversely titled Saving America's Story, released on the 4th of July. Exhibits at the Smithsonian Museums occasionally have sparked controversy, but never before has the entire institution come under assault. To the extent that there is a story told at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History, the report said, it's one of regret, tragedy, and shame. I never came away with that sense, nor has anyone I've known or shepherded to the Smithsonian sites over decades. As for Trump's sense of history, it was on sick display recently in a social media binge that depicted him in scores of AI-generated posts as variously guardian of the world, posed against a fiery backdrop of strikes on Iran, the man who saved America, a caped crusader saving George Washington from falling off of Mount Rushmore, and the cosmic commander.
Trump is none of those things, just as he wasn't the successful mogul he played on TV. And as polls show, Americans have soured on his reality show presidency, especially when their reality is high prices and headlines of war and killing in city streets. Being outrageous, erratic, and unpredictable is a selling point for a reality TV figure, but not for a president.
And a voice of reason about socialism is needed before Americans vote, according to Kathleen Parker. If ever Democrats and Republicans should agree on an issue, it should be that socialism is bad and capitalism with tweaking is good. Yet Republicans are the loudest voices saying so. As we approach the midterms, Democratic Socialists are making headway among voters who have been emboldened by the 2025 election of New York Mayor Zohran Mamdani, a self-described Democratic Socialist. And candidates endorsed by the Democratic Socialists of America advanced in a few dozen primary elections just this year. In response, Republicans and conservatives are speaking out against socialism, Marxism, and communism, if at times disingenuously. These three orthodoxies are not the same, though they overlap. Not many communists are running for public office, at least not as communists, despite President Trump's claim that we're running against communists. Even popular Catholic Bishop Robert Barron, founder of Word on Fire Catholic Ministries, has chimed in, explaining that a market economy, as opposed to socialism, is consistent with human freedom and dignity. The DSA wants to take over the largest corporations and bring democratic principles to the workplace. This may appeal to some, but a thorough reading of the DSA's program should make most Americans shudder. The DSA wants to rewrite the Constitution, eliminate the Senate, and replace the Supreme Court, defund the police, and provide free health care. This largesse would be funded, of course, by the taxpayers. History and our own eyes, see Venezuela, tell us the pursuit of equal outcomes can lead to equal misery. Given the DSA's stated aspirations, it's fair to say that democratic socialism is the gateway ideology to socialism, if not necessarily communism. Recent polling shows that voters most interested in the socialist platform tend to be young and college educated. They're ripe for the seduction because of the high cost of everything. Even people in their 30s and 40s often can't afford to buy a house. Job insecurity is growing as artificial intelligence threatens employees. Yes, life is not perfect now, and the promise of free stuff and feel-good rhetoric periodically seduce the young, as well as members of the intellectual elite. The GOP is wise to take the lead in exposing what socialists would do if given power. I wonder why Democrats are letting Republicans seize the moment. House Speaker Mike Johnson from Louisiana and other House leaders recently held a news conference to highlight the looming socialist threat. They did, however, seem prone to hyperbole. About 25 years ago, I traveled to Cuba with a British diplomat and journalists. It was an eye-opener. People living in dilapidated apartment buildings without air conditioning hung out of open windows in search of release. It was picturesque to see vintage Fords and Buicks lining the streets. The cars still ran, but I'm sure the Cuban people would appreciate newer vehicles if they could afford them. The decaying power grid meant that people might have fewer hours of electricity per day. This is what communism looks like. What socialism and communism fail to acknowledge is what capitalism embraces. Capitalism embraces, and that's human nature. People respond positively to incentives and rewards, and behavior adapts accordingly. Humans were designed to create, design, produce, and find happiness in accomplishment. Without incentives, why botherism settles in. Entrepreneurship just fizzles. Hard work becomes pointless, and prosperity becomes a memory. This isn't to say capitalism is perfect. For corporations to more fairly benefit workers and communities and not just the shareholders, legal, social, and economic constraints might be necessary, but a socialist takeover would be overkill. To young people inclined toward instant gratification, socialism promises relief. To those folks, I say, politics is like the weather. It comes and it goes. And it makes no sense to reinvent a country designed by some of history's finest minds for the common good. Count your blessings, grab an umbrella, and vote wisely. As for Democrats, don't let the Republicans be the only voices of sanity. Explain to your constituents why socialism is a utopian cocktail that might get you tipsy, but the hangover is hell. And Republicans, stop with the Red Scare hysteria and stick to the facts. The facts are enough.
Amen. As part of our newspaper reading, we now present the day's death listings. If you need further information on any of these names, you can call us at 716-821-5555. Charles E. Bull. Charles, known as Chaz Metelliano. Sandra J. Messer. Nee Hardy. George N. Peters. Dorothy Agnes Schwab, Kenneth C. Sunday, Eleanor, known as Ellie Jedrick, Jedrysyk, Nee Coots, or Cuts, Elaine Marie Milks, John L. Nason, Kathleen A. Kirk, and John L. Nason, a well-known businessman who passed away at the age of 70, and might I add, carded 4 hole-in-ones, which is very amazing. And Kay Granger, who passed away at 83, a path-breaking congresswoman from Texas. Again, if you need any further information on any of these names, you can call us at 716-821-5555.
And it's time for Royal Stars.
Let's hear it.
Happy birthday, Tuesday, August the 4th. You are strong-willed, intelligent, and dynamic. You're also independent, influential, and a seeker of knowledge. This year is about creating solid foundations in your life, both external and internal. And simplicity is the key. Aries, you have lots of mental energy today because the moon is in your sign, dancing with your ruler, fiery Mars, which pushes you into a leadership role. Tonight, check your money. Taurus, focus your energy on home and family today. This is also a gentle social day that is sweet for romance. Tonight you're going to win. Gemini, sports and competitive physical activities might appeal to you today, especially with friends, teams, and groups. Tonight, though, enjoy private moments. Cancer, you're noticed today. Be aware of this in case you have to do some damage control. Tonight, be friendly. Leo, today you can explore new ideas, meet new people, and learn new things. Politics and controversial subjects might also appeal today. Tonight you will be admired. Virgos, you might be caught up in discussions about shared property, shared wealth, inheritance, taxes, or debts. If so, this is a poor day to agree to anything important. Yikes. Tonight, explore and learn. I don't want to be a Virgo today.
I am a Virgo.
Wow. Sorry about that, Leo.
Yeah, me too.
Libras, you might attract someone to you today who is feisty and a bit aggressive, but interesting. See what they have to say. It might be enlightening in some way. Tonight, you better check your finances, though. Scorpios, you're ready to roll up your sleeves and work. This is why you might delegate to others and be a bit bossy. Tonight, you better get better organized, not so bossy. Sagittarius, this is a playful, competitive day. If you're interested in team sports or physical athletics, get out, do your thing. You're revved up and ready for action. Be smart and be patient with spouses, partners, and close friends in order to keep the peace. And tonight, continue to enjoy socializing. Capricorns, be understanding and gracious with family members today to avoid conflict. Nevertheless, you want to make some improvements around the place. You might see the need for repairs along with ways to fortify where you live for future security. Tonight, then, you can relax at your home. Aquarius, you'll defend your ideas today and explain what you want because your communication style is energized by Mars. This makes you want to initiate and to take charge. Cool your jets. Tonight, you will have an interesting discussion. And finally, Pisces, you might be tempted to spend money quickly and rashly. This is not a good idea. Restrict your spending to food and gas today from 2:15 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. And you know, that's 11:15 a.m. to 8 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Wow. That is so specific.
I was going to say, that
Be
sounds
smart.
scary.
Tonight, take care of your belongings.
That's
And
worse than
it for the
Virgo.
stars. Wow. I've never seen it that specific.
Yeah, that's a little scary.
Yeah.
All right, so here's some interesting health news. The hospice reputation during crisis leaves experts concerned. Mark Van Treese regularly sees his Vietnam War buddies over breakfast, attends his grandchildren's Little League games, and when he's up to it, tends to his garden. Time is precious for him. Last year, doctors told the 76-year-old former truck driver that a combination of heart failure, lung disease, and liver damage had left him with only 6 months to live. That was about 11 months ago, Van Treese said in May. In June of 2025, Van Treese began hospice care in his home in Novato, California. Medicare is covering those services for him. His hospice caregivers reminded him of the attention his unit received from medical staff in Vietnam. We used to call them guardian angels, he said, but the Trump administration's allegations of unchecked hospice fraud in California have tainted the industry's reputation. Health policy researchers and hospice administrators worry that the negative attention and potential for overly punitive regulations could put California patients and taxpayers on the losing end. The fraud situation has done a lot of damage to the reputation of the hospice all over and undone a lot of the progress that had been made in destigmatizing hospice, said Lauren Hunt. Policymakers should pursue targeted strategies that root out fraud and abuse without overburdening the many providers who are doing the right thing. Hospice care is facing sweeping restrictions. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services in May announced a 6-month national moratorium on hospice provider enrollment in Medicare and increased oversight in California and several other states with elevated fraud risks: Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, Ohio, and Texas. In a statement, CMS spokesperson Timothy Foster said state inaction on hospice programs rife with fraud drove the need for federal intervention. Foster said CMS believes the crackdown won't affect patients' abilities to obtain services, with roughly 7,000 hospices still approved nationwide. California has been cracking down on the problems with Democratic Attorney General Rob Bonta. Deemed hospice fraud an epidemic last year. The state has had its own moratorium on hospice licenses since 2021, charged numerous providers with crimes over the years, and implemented emergency regulations to curb fraud in June. Hospice administrators in good standing have found themselves in the crosshairs. A Washington Post investigation in June found that the federal government's new anti-fraud task force has already suspended licenses for 43 legitimate hospices. Still, Hunt and other policy researchers welcome the efforts to target unscrupulous operators. While most hospices are committed to providing high-quality care, there are serious concerns about a subset that exploit patients and the system for financial gain. The hospice industry is uniquely vulnerable to fraud because of insufficient licensing regulations and inadequate oversight, according to industry researchers. And the percentage of the population aging into Medicare is rapidly rising, with spending expected to accelerate in the next 10 years. Most of the rapid growth in operators has been among for-profit hospices, a state auditor's report in 2022. In California, about 94% of hospice providers are now for-profit, a shift from 20 years ago when nonprofits dominated the industry in California and nationally. On average, for-profit operators make around $2,100 more per patient in pre-tax profit and $49 more per patient day than nonprofit hospice operators, according to one study. Hospice, when done well, is one of the most compassionate and meaningful benefits in healthcare. We should be working to protect that, not inadvertently erode confidence in it. By the Bay Health has been in business for 50 years and serves around 750 hospice patients in the Bay Area. 89% of them are covered by Medicare, 3% by California's Medicaid program, Medi-Cal, and the rest by commercial healthcare plans. And Novato Vantrease shows where a catheter was surgically implanted to drain fluid building up in his abdomen. The hospital trained his wife, Paula Vantrease, to connect a suctioning device to the catheter to siphon the excess fluid. A hospice nurse from by the Bay helped her master the technique the first few times she tried it at home. Near orders all of Vantrease's medicines and rejiggers them when necessary. And every week, Near checks the surgical incision around the catheter for infection, listens to Vantrease's lungs, checks his blood pressure, and cleans and dresses the open wounds that sometimes form from burst blisters on his legs. California's emergency regulations against fraud took effect in late June. Hunt said the new regulations are a step in the right direction, but urged caution. The broader impact on the industry should be closely monitored, particularly to ensure that well-intentioned, high-quality providers are not placed under undue strain or forced to close.
And the DEC and the EPA are busy testing properties in Niagara County. Federal and state efforts to investigate unusually radioactive properties in Niagara County continued, with hundreds more properties surveyed, and that was as of Monday. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation have now visited more than 1,200 properties since July the 23rd, when the agencies first ramped up their efforts to search for radioactive waste buried in residents' yards. A total of 658 property owners have signed access agreements with the agencies, allowing officials to enter and conduct on-the-ground surveys to search for any unusually elevated radiation levels. The agencies continue focusing their efforts in western Niagara County. The ground surveys follow aerial and vehicle-based surveys that began in October of 2023. In March, the EPA and DEC sent 121 property owners letters informing them their properties were possibly contaminated with radioactive materials. At least 6 properties were found to have elevated radiation levels that warranted soil sampling and indoor radon testing. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is working with 4 families to relocate them while the investigations continue. Preliminary data reviews indicate that the vast majorities of properties screened will need no further action, the DEC wrote in an emailed statement that was Sunday. EPA and DEC began contacting residents and property owners when screening results and property-specific technical review are complete, to advise when no additional radiological investigation is needed at their property and no further action is needed at this time. Those notifications will continue on a rolling basis according to the state agency. The initial notification will be followed in the coming weeks with a more detailed information packet by mail that will include a formal letter of determination, a copy of the property screening map, general information about the screening process, and contact information, the DEC emailed statement said. While residents in a neighborhood just south of the Reservoir State Park have repeatedly asked Governor Kathy Hochul to declare their area a Superfund site, her office told WGRZ that it cannot do so. The state does not include radioactive materials or radionuclides in a list of hazardous substances. Any Superfund designation would have to come from the EPA, which does include radionuclides on its list of hazardous substances. The federal agency is funding the investigation of the Niagara County properties under its authority under the Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act, or CERCLA, enacted by Congress back in 1980 and also known as Superfund. Should a source of the elevated radiation levels be identified, the EPA can then use CERCLA to require the responsible party to reimburse the agency for cleanup and for the investigation costs.
Okay, so in case you didn't notice, some areas got a whole heck of a lot of rain. And there is a picture of Oppenheimer Park in Niagara Falls. And I am telling you, it looks like a lake. There is a shelter, and the picture has a picture of the shelter with picnic tables, and the water is up to the bench seat on the picnic tables. That's how much water is in the park right now. And of course, Niagara County was obviously hit the hardest. Some spots got over 4 inches of rain, and it also damaged, lightning also damaged a building at Canisius University. Some parts of Niagara County also faced a tornado warning early Sunday and received at least 4 inches. One community, Sanborn, actually received 4.6 inches of rain in a 24-hour span that ended on Monday. The heavy rain caused flooding in Erie County too, and the lightning that damaged the building at Canisius University was flooding and impacted roads and a lot of low-lying areas. Canisius University's Health Science building was damaged. The firefighters responded to the scene about 8:45 p.m. and found bricks falling from a chimney at 63 East Delavan Avenue, the university said in a statement.
You're listening to reading of articles from the Buffalo News for today, Tuesday, August the 4th, on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We will return for more readings after this short break. Your readers today are Lori and
Lita.
If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you.
And we'll continue now with our reading of articles from today's Buffalo News. You on the other side over there, what's your name?
I'm Lori.
And I'm Lita.
Okay. And back to City and Region on B1. The board clears a priest in review after teen's death by suicide. A Buffalo priest did not have an inappropriate relationship with a Canisius High School student who died by suicide in 2017, a review board has found. Accusations that an inappropriate relationship between the Reverend Joseph Gatto and Devin Waring may have led to Waring's death surfaced publicly earlier this year at a listening session in U.S. Bankruptcy Court for the Western District of New York that was part of the Buffalo Catholic Diocese Chapter 11 case. But a review board examination of the case over the past several months has found that there was no such link, and the priest has been cleared to resume his ministry. The review board also made determinations in the case of 2 other priests who were on administration leave, the Reverend Patrick O'Keefe and the Reverend Jeffrey L. Nowak. The board found that accusations of inappropriate conduct toward adults lodged against O'Keefe were substantiated and recommended that O'Keefe not be allowed to resume active ministry at this time. O'Keefe, who was a parochial vicar for 4 parishes in Genesee County, was placed on administrative leave in October. In the case of Nowak, who was arrested in July on federal child pornography charges, the board recommended that the priest be removed from the clerical state in an expedited manner. Nowak had been on administrative leave since 2019 following a previous review board finding on accusations that he sexually harassed a seminary student. Bishop Michael Fisher has accepted the most recent unanimous recommendations of the board. Tracy Waring, Devin's mother, raised questions about Gatto's relationship with her son at a listening session in front of federal judge Carl L. Buckey. Fisher also attended the session and heard Waring's remarks. Tracy Waring said Gatto gave the sacrament of reconciliation to her son just hours before he took his own life, and when she contacted the priest looking for answers, Gatto told her he couldn't talk about what they had discussed in the confessional. Waring also said Gatto visited the house and asked to see the jeans Devin was wearing when he died, and the priest texted Devin's cell phone after he was dead asking that he pray for me. Gatto took a voluntary leave of absence while the case was referred to a review board. Gatto had been placed on administrative leave in 2018 due to an accusation that he made a sexual advance on an adult male back in 2000. He was returned to ministry after a review board determined that his improper conduct did not rise to the level requiring removal from ministry. But for Tracy Waring, that accusation, in combination with the events leading up to her son's death, led to unanswered questions about why he had committed suicide, she said. The review board hired Julie Ledwin, a retired detective who had worked in the sex offense squad of the Buffalo Police Department, to investigate Tracy Waring's accusations. Ledwin submitted a report to the board which found that any allegation that Reverend Gatto had an inappropriate relationship with the deceased or did anything to contribute to his death is unsubstantiated. Tracy Waring could not be reached for comment on the review board determination. Gatto will be able to return to ministry. Gatto, who was rector of the former Christ the King Seminary at the time of Waring's death, was most recently serving as senior parochial victor of St. Benedict Parish, and that's in Eggertsville. A diocesan spokesman said no decision has been made on Gatto's next assignment. The bishop was in discussions with Gatto about his future ministry, said the spokesman, who was Greg Tucker.
And a little bit of finance news. KKR is set to buy Integer Holdings in a $5.7 billion deal. KKR will take medical device manufacturer Integer Holdings, the former Wilson Greatbatch, private in all-cash deal valued at about $5.7 billion, expanding its healthcare portfolio with the acquisition of a key supplier to the medtech industry. Shares of Integer Holdings, now based in Plano, Texas, rose 2.6% in early trading, and the private equity firm is gaining a critical supplier to medical device companies, with Integer producing components and finished products used in cardiovascular, neuromodulation therapies, among other applications. The takeover comes amid sustained private equity interest in healthcare. Some notable buyouts over the last year include American Industrial Partners' $1.27 billion acquisition of Avanos Medical and Blackstone, and TPG's Odile for women's health-focused diagnostics firm Hologic for $18.3 billion. KeyBank Capital Markets analyst Brett Fishburne told Reuters the latest acquisition was positive for MedTech, as it showed private equity firms were realizing the value of public companies with strong track records despite transitory headwinds that have weighed on stock prices, citing Integer as an example. Fishburne said Integer could serve as a platform for KKR, which could acquire additional smaller assets and layer them into the company's existing operations. Under the deal terms announced on Monday, KKR is paying $127 per share in cash, representing a 4.78% premium to Integer's closing price on Friday. The transaction includes the assumption of Integer's outstanding debt. Integer has faced activist investor pressure in the past. In March, the company reached an agreement with Irenic Capital Management, one of its largest shareholders, to appoint 2 directors to its board. And in business briefly, latest Spider-Man movie soars to $927 million worldwide. Sony Pictures and Marvel's Spider-Man Brand New Day, gotta see it, soared to the second biggest North American opening weekend ever, with a $355 million haul at the box office, according to industry experts, just behind Avengers Endgame, good movie, which opened to $357 million in 2019. Spider-Man Brand New Day earned $927 million worldwide, also the second biggest opening ever, according to Paul head of the market, Paul D, yes, head of marketplace trends. Its franchise predecessor, Spider-Man No Way Home, opened to $260 million in North America. And, here's sad news. Musk's wealth has fallen to $684 billion. Tisk tisk. SpaceX pulled off a successful launch last week at its Starbase facility in Texas, sending its Starship rocket into orbit. It hasn't stopped Elon Musk's fortune from falling back to Earth. The world's first trillionaire is now poorer than he was before SpaceX's initial public offering, priced last month, according to the Bloomberg Billionaires Index. Can you imagine being on that list? Mm-hmm. Musk's wealth, which peaked at $1.33 trillion on the 16th of June, now stands at a paltry $684 billion, a $600 billion plus decline in just over a month.
That's a lot to lose in a month.
It sure is. I feel bad for him. Shares of Space Exploration Technologies Corporation hit a closing high of $201, almost $202 on the 16th of June, but have since tumbled 46% to a record low of $108 per share. Next month, as many as 911.5 million shares belonging to insiders and early backers will be unlocked, potentially putting more downward pressure on the price. Another recent catalyst for the drop in Musk's wealth comes from Tesla Incorporated. Shares of the electric car makers have fallen 17% since it released second quarter results on July 22nd.
Wow. And in development, North Park Innovations expands again. A year after nearly doubling its space with a 10,000 square foot addition, a Southern Tier provider of high-tech products and curriculum for vocational training around the globe is expanding again. North Park Innovations Group, owned by Bill and Lori Northrup, wants to buy and renovate the vacant 14,000 square foot former Timber Hut Cabin Company facility in Great Valley, giving it more space to grow and to expand. The new facility, located at 4580 Route 219, will give the company more production space and allow it to have a full showroom while adding 10 employees. This is in addition to its existing operation located at 6442 Route 242 in Ellicottville, where the 46-year-old company is based in 22,000 plus square feet of space. The company spent $770,000 last year to construct an expansion there to handle its expanded needs, but is already out of space, according to its application to the Cattaraugus County Industrial Development Agency. Plans call for acquiring the 4.5-acre Great Valley property for $400,000, financed with a mortgage, and then spending another $100,000 on equipment. North Park asked the IDA for $8,000 in sales tax breaks and a $5,000 mortgage recording tax abatement. Purchasing, training, and growing all have risk and cost, the company wrote in its application. This will allow some truly needed savings on the investment that is made up front. The company previously had 36 employees when it applied for and received $117,000 in IDA benefits 2 years ago and pledged to add 2 jobs. It now employs 51 people. The project is expected to start this year and complete next year. North Park, originally called Stride Tool, was founded back in 1980 and provides training equipment and teaching materials under the iConnect brand to teach workers in the mechanical building trades such as HVAC and refrigeration. It also provides products and curriculum for the cybersecurity, information technology, green energy, and smart home trades under the Marcraft brand, a 40-year-old technical training provider that it acquired more than 3 years ago. Marcraft has customers in all 50 states, the Canadian provinces, and in more than 30 countries, and that's worldwide. It designs, manufactures, and ships the equipment from Ellicottville, where it also maintains customer service, financial, technical, and administrative functions. All of its sales are outside of New York.
Okay. And some Western New York sheriffs slammed the new law limiting police cooperation with ICE. Niagara County Sheriff Michael Felicetti said his office would abide by a new state law that bars local police agencies in New York from allowing their officers and resources to be used by federal agencies in civil immigration actions. But he made clear he doesn't like it. Sheriff's departments in Niagara and Cattaraugus counties, as well as the Allegheny Village Police Department, are among a dozen New York law enforcement agencies that have allowed their officers and resources, including jail space, to be used by U.S. Immigration and Custom Enforcement under a 1996 federal law. Under the Local Cops Local Crime Act, which Governor Kathy Hochul championed as part of the state's $277 billion budget, enacted in May, the department cannot assist ICE or any federal agency on civil immigration matters. Nothing keeps the agencies from working with ICE or other federal agencies on criminal matters. Let me be clear. While I will comply with the law, I intend to continue working closely with our federal immigration partners, Felicetti said in a statement. He added that irrespective of the ends of the officer's agreement with federal agencies, his office would still honor lawful immigration detainers, notify federal law enforcement before the release of inmates, and maintain our long-standing partnership with federal immigration authorities for public safety. As a border county, Niagara County faces unique public safety and homeland security challenges. Our proximity to the international border makes communication and coordination with our federal immigration and law enforcement partners critical. These relationships have been built over decades and have contributed significantly to the safety and security of our communities. Cattaraugus County Sheriff Eric Butler said he remains opposed to this effort to prevent the state sheriffs from cooperating with ICE, and he is exploring his legal options. When individuals in our custody are subject to federal immigration enforcement, this partnership allows transfers to occur safely and responsibly within a secure correctional setting, he said in a statement to the news. Ending that cooperation does not eliminate underlying safety concerns, it simply shifts them elsewhere. Butler warned of the consequences of terminating the agreement with federal law enforcement. In my view, forcing the end of these partnerships increases the likelihood that enforcement actions will occur in our neighborhoods rather than in a controlled environment, creating unnecessary risk for law enforcement officers, the public, and the individuals involved, he said. People familiar with the law said Felicetti would not be violating the law by working with ICE regarding inmates detained for non-civil immigration reasons. But if the sheriff continues to detain people based on their suspected civil immigration violation, it would be against the law. Counties do not get to pick and choose which state laws they follow, and those that do not comply will be held accountable, said Jen Goodman, a spokesperson for Hochul. The Local Cops, Local Crimes Act does not prevent police from working with ICE and other federal law enforcement to apprehend or detain dangerous criminals. Anyone who would divert personnel and resources away from local law enforcement is clearly not interested in keeping New York communities safe. On the 24th of July, the Attorney General Letitia James sent letters to the 12 agencies that have had agreements with ICE asking them to comply with the new law by the 14th of August. 3 law enforcement officials have suggested they would not abide by the law. They include Madison County Sheriff Todd Hood, the Republican candidate for lieutenant governor running along Nassau County Executive Bruce Blakeman. On Thursday, as James visited Western New York, a reporter asked her about Felicetti's remarks. James said litigation was pending in U.S. District Court. The U.S. Department of Justice is challenging a part of the budget that outlaws law enforcement agencies from wearing masks in their interaction with the public. James said she awaited a declaratory judgment from the court to support the law. James said the law was needed, in part, because masked immigration agents acting without warrants jump out of unmarked vehicles with no identification, basically seizing individuals in violation of a law. So it's a matter of public trust, public safety, and it's also a matter of public dollars in the state of New York being used to detain individuals on civil immigrant warrants and not criminal. One of the most important lessons from that tragic day, where the shooting of Renee Nicole Goodman, was that communication and cooperation between local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies are essential to protect our homeland, he said. Breaking down those partnerships does not make our community safer. It weakens our ability to prevent crime, identify threats, and keep our citizens safe.
And you're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, and the time is 17 minutes after the hour. And in local news, Kaleida Health is a passive parent to 2 Western New York facilities. Kaleida Health for years has been deepening its bond with several struggling small hospitals in Western New York, sometimes even with the benefit of state funding and support. Western New York's largest health system on Monday announced the next step in building those relationships, bringing 2 area hospitals already aligned with Kaleida even closer in a move that was largely expected to happen at some point. Kaleida is now the sole member and passive parent of Dunkirk-based Brooks TLC Hospital System and Bertrand Chaffee Hospital in Springville. The move, the organization said, is designed to bolster healthcare in Erie, Chautauqua, Cattaraugus, and Wyoming counties. Under the passive parent model, Brooks TLC Hospital and Bertrand Chaffee will maintain oversight and control of their day-to-day operations, finances, and their services. Kaleida, meanwhile, will provide administrative and financial guidance, support service lines, and help guide direction of the hospitals. In such a relationship, the smaller organization is able to gain efficiencies and scale, but preserve some of local influence or control, while the larger organization expands its geographical reach, including through new patient referrals, and gets more leverage for negotiations with insurers, but avoids assuming the financial liabilities of the smaller partners. The alignment with Kaleida Health is a strategic and proactive initiative that continues our efforts to secure and enhance health care for Chautauqua County residents well into the future, Brooks TLC President and CEO Ken Morris said in a statement. Bertrand Chaffee CEO Teresa Donahue said the new structure will lead to better care coordination with Kaleida, making it easier for patients to access programs, services, and higher levels of care at Buffalo Medical Center, Gates Vascular Institute, and the Golisano Children's Hospital. It will also enable us to introduce new and expanded programs and services in response to local healthcare needs. In the model, members of the board of directors at Brooks TLC and Bertrand Chaffee will transition out of their roles. The Brooks TLC and Bertrand Chaffee boards will now consist of 3 Kaleida executives: Chief Operating Officer Kelly Corby, Chief Financial Officer Hugh Chisholm, and Executive Vice President of Strategy and Partnerships Matthew Drake. In a news release Monday, outgoing Brooks TLC Board Chair Christopher Lansky and outgoing Bertrand Chaffee Board President Gary Eppolito expressed support for the move, saying the deeper bonds with Kaleida will help preserve healthcare access in their communities. The news comes as all 3 organizations grapple with rising costs and the upcoming reduction in federal Medicaid spending. It also comes as major transitions are underway at the hospitals in technology and in infrastructure. In alignment with Kaleida, Brooks TLC transitioned to a new electronic health record system that uses Epic software, and also moved to Infor for its finance, supply chain, and human resource functions. Bertrand Chaffee Hospital will also move to Epic and Infor for the future. Brooks TLC is in the process of replacing its aging hospital in Dunkirk with a $223 million hospital that is being built in Fredonia. That hospital, called Northern Chautauqua Hospital, will be a single-story, 133,000 square foot structure that is expected to handle more than 260,000 patient visits every year. Kaleida previously said it would determine how to deepen its relationship with Brooks TLC as the hospital was being built. The passive parent relationship announced Monday is a next step, but it's unclear if it could eventually lead to Brooks TLC fully merging into Kaleida, or Kaleida becoming the active parent of Brooks TLC, similar to Kaleida's relationship with Upper Allegheny Health Systems. The 24-bed Bertrand Chaffee Hospital, meanwhile, is embarking on a $17.6 million project that will include an overhaul of its emergency department and improvements to the facility's critical infrastructure. But Bertrand Chaffee recently closed its 80-bed Jenny B. Richmond nursing home after leaders determined that its continued operation was no longer feasible. In the announcement Monday, Kaleida said Bertrand Chaffee and Brooks TLC also will now have better coordination of care with Erie County Medical Center, which works closely with Kaleida for mental health, transplantation, and trauma care. We want to thank the outgoing Brooks TLC Hospital and Bertrand Chaffee Hospital boards of directors for their enthusiastic support, their partnership, and collaboration throughout this process, said Kaleida President and CEO Don Boyd. The board's steadfast advocacy, vision for the future of healthcare in our region, and their shared commitment to continued access to high-quality care have been instrumental in moving these transitions forward and making them finally a reality.
That sounds all good. And an article entitled "Waiting for a Break: Why Some Cold Cases Crack Decades After Investigations Open." The hardest part of a cold case isn't always waiting. It's wondering whether the waiting will ever end. Nuria Colombina Rodriguez was 25 when she went missing from the Bronx in New York City in the early 1990s. For her loved ones, it took more than 3 decades to learn what happened to the young Bronx mother. In June of '92, a farmer found buried remains about 140 miles away in Berks County, PA. The body was identified as Rodriguez in April of '26. For more than 40 years, John Warren's family had no answers about who killed him. Their cases are among thousands that went cold after leads dried up and investigations stalled. While time can bury clues, experts say it also can uncover them. Advances in DNA technology, shifting relationships, and fresh eyes on old evidence helps investigators solve mysteries once thought unsolvable. Joe Kennedy, a former North Carolina police officer and retired special agent in charge for the Naval Criminal Investigation Service, or NCIS, said the 3 most common ways cases are solved are through physical evidence, witness testimony, and confessions. However, those same elements can also cause a case to stall. A key witness moves away. Evidence can't be tested with existing technology. Potential suspects stop talking. Leads dry up and investigations lose momentum. That's when a case goes cold. Kennedy said there are an estimated 350,000 unsolved homicides in the U.S. dating back to 1965. But cold doesn't mean forgotten. Sometimes the very thing that allows a case to fade into the background becomes the key to solve it. Kennedy founded the Carolinas Cold Case Coalition, which helps police departments revisit unsolved cases through mentoring, training, and fresh reviews of old evidence. While DNA and forensic genetic genealogy transformed investigations, he said one of the most powerful tools isn't technology, it's time. Decades later, relationships change, friends grow apart, marriages end. Witnesses who once stayed silent may finally be willing to talk. When we get to people in cases that are maybe 30 to 40 years old, Kennedy said, it's just a matter of sitting down and having a conversation with them and getting them to rationalize what they did. Kennedy said confessions play a larger role in solving cold cases than many people realize. Investigators often examine what happened to a suspect after a crime. Many struggle with guilt, turn to alcohol or drugs, have trouble sleeping, or move often. They have nightmares about having done it, Kennedy said. Part of what happens is they end up admitting it to someone. Those confessions can happen anywhere, from a barstool conversation to a casual discussion with a friend or relative. That's what happened in the 1994 killing of Robin Lawrence, 37, a mother found dead in her Springfield, Virginia home. Investigators collected blood evidence at the scene, but it wasn't until 2023 that detectives found Stephen Smirk through DNA evidence. Almost 3 decades after the killing and hours after providing a DNA sample, Smirk confessed. I knew that I was going to kill somebody, he told investigators about the night of the crime. I did not know who I was going to kill. Something inside of me just compelled me to do it. However, not every case comes with a confession. For many cold cases, the breakthrough comes from evidence investigators had all along. DNA testing helped find victims and suspects years, sometimes decades after a crime. When investigators can't find a direct match through law enforcement databases, they turn to forensic genetic genealogy, using DNA matches and family trees to find relatives and narrow potential suspects. That's where consumer DNA services play a role. People who use companies such as Ancestry DNA, 23andMe, and MyHeritage can choose to upload their DNA data to public databases like GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA, which law enforcement can use under certain circumstances to help identify victims or suspects. The technique helped solve hundreds of cold cases nationwide, but it comes at a steep cost. Forensic genetic genealogy investigations can cost from $8,000 to $10,000, particularly when forensic specialists must separate multiple DNA profiles before analysis, according to Michael Coble, Executive Director for the Center of Human Identification at the University of North Texas Health Science Center. For small police departments with limited resources, the price can put some cases out of reach. For many departments, money is still one of the biggest obstacles. Costs associated with DNA testing, forensic genealogy, and lengthy investigations can strain already limited budgets. The police chief has to decide, well, do I buy a new police cruiser next year, or do I do this one case? Staffing shortages create another challenge, leaving many departments without investigators dedicated solely to cold cases. There's also the issue of how police departments can use funds. David Middleman, CEO of Texas-based lab Orthram. Police departments have money, Middleman said, but most of it is spent on salaries and operational aspects. What ends up happening is that there's rules and budgets that are set for what kind of DNA testing you're going to use, and there are standard DNA testing protocols that have been used for years that the government funds, he says. The government subsidizes some activities and not others. So the question to ask, in my opinion, is why is technology not as subsidized right now? And what would it take for it to become more subsidized? Efforts to improve funding, including the Carla Walker Act introduced in 24 to dedicate federal grant funds to support forensic genetic genealogy and DNA analysis. U.S. Senator John Cornyn of Texas and Peter Welch of Vermont reintroduced the bill, and it passed the Senate in mid-June and is awaiting House leadership to call it forward. As agencies look for ways to stretch limited resources to turn to new tools, Kennedy said law enforcement agencies are exploring how AI could help analyze decades of case files, body camera footage, and surveillance video more quickly than human investigators alone. The technology is still evolving, but supporters believe it could help uncover overlooked leads in cases that have sat dormant for years. Solving a cold case doesn't guarantee what families are looking for. Kennedy believes closure is often the wrong word. That person, their mother, their cousin, their brother, they're not coming back, he said. They're never going to have closure. What we may be able to do is give families some resolution so they're not left wondering what happened. Still, for families who spent decades wondering what happened, the truth can bring answers.
Amen to that. And you are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, and the time right now is 31 minutes after the hour. Let's go to sports for a minute. Tight end Kincaid can breathe easy now after a shot in the family jewels. Dalton Kincaid gave the Buffalo Bills a good scare on Monday. The team's fourth-year tight end appeared to suffer a lower body injury during the team portion of the fourth practice of training camp that was at St. John Fisher University. Trainers came out to the field to attend to the injury. Concern immediately went to Kincaid's knees, which have given him trouble over the past 2 seasons. As it turns out, though, the injury was to a more sensitive part of the body. It was a family jewels shot. So yeah, the knee's all good, Kincaid said after practice. It was a knee to the family jewels. Just a few minutes of pain. Yeah, that's understandable. That can be considered good news for everyone other than Kincaid, of course, because it means the tight end was able to return to the practice field. He put together a solid session with multiple touchdown catches from Josh Allen. Kincaid's health is a major factor heading into the 26th season. The offense is undeniably better when he's on the field, but availability has been an issue, particularly last season when he was limited to just 26.7% of the team's offensive snaps. I felt really confident going into that 5 to 6 weeks that we had off, Kincaid said. I think I attacked it a little bit better than I have in previous off seasons and focused a lot more on training and saying no to trips and trying to get things in before the season starts. I spent a lot of time just training down in Southern California and working there, and I feel really good where I'm at right now. Kincaid's main focus in the off season has been to add strength. Being on a pitch count of sorts last season wore on him mentally. It hurt not being able to be on the field to help his teammates at times, which is a situation he's trying to avoid repeating. I hope it's hitting the ground running in full speed, he said. Ultimately, that's not really up to me. I just go in when my number is called. A new look. For the entirety of Allen's NFL career, the Bills' starting quarterback has gone against one defense. That defense of former head coach Sean McDermott. One benefit of the switch to a 3-4 scheme under the new defensive coordinator Jim Leonhard is the new look it gives Allen during practice. Bills coach Joe Brady discussed ahead of Monday's practice why that's so important. Previously, Josh was like, all right, I know what's happening here because I've just gone against it for so long. Or I know the safety's tendency just from practicing against him, Brady said. Right now, being a new defense, it's actually been a positive from that perspective because there's a lot of nuances that Josh hasn't figured out yet. The Bills practiced under a steady rain for nearly the entirety of Monday's practice. Veteran reporters called it being some of the worst conditions the team has practiced in, which is certainly true for the fans who withstood the rain and cool for August breeze. Defensive tackle Deion Walker did not take part in team drills, with Fedarian Mathis getting a look with the starters. Cornerback Dee Alford had the defensive play of the day, a diving pass breakup in the end zone. Mathis and Michael Holt.
Height.
Okay.
Height. Doesn't look anything like it's spelled.
Combined on a would-be sack that was produced by good coverage. Height continues to move well in his return from the Achilles surgery. One of the best throws of training camp to date by a backup quarterback came when Sean Bushel found Quentin Skinner in the end zone. Left tackle Deion Dawkins caught a touchdown on a tricky play. Next, the Bills return to the practice field at St. John Fisher at 8:30 a.m. Tuesday. That was today. Special teams coordinator Jeff Rogers spoke with the media at 8 a.m. this morning.
Okay. Should we talk about another Buffalo Bill?
I think we should.
All right, let's talk about Cole Bishop's strengths and influencing the Bills' plan on defense. Each morning on campus at St. John Fisher University, before most Buffalo Bill players finish dressing for practice, Cole Bishop is on a side field listening to safeties coach Joe Dana work with rookie Jalen Kilgore. Bishop does not need to be out there. The walkthrough is Dana's way of helping Kilgore prepare for all the calls and checks a safety must communicate to teammates before the ball is snapped. Bishop does not assume that he knows everything, though. Year 3 in the NFL for Bishop is a different challenge. First, he spent the past several months learning the encyclopedia-sized playbook installed by the Bills' new defensive coordinator, Jim Leonhard. Second, Bishop must develop a relationship with whoever starts at the other safety spot. C.J. Gardner-Johnson's injury meant more snaps for Geno Stone and DeMar Hamlin at practice Monday. 2 of the 3 are new to Buffalo. Lastly, Bishop must build off his breakthrough season in 2025. I always had faith in myself, Bishop said. He told the News following another rain-soaked practice Monday. I knew what I could do, but to actually do it, you build confidence that way. The transition from one scheme to another, especially after a breakout season, can lead to growing pains. Leonhard understands. He had to learn a new defense and play calling several times during his 10-year NFL career as a safety. The lessons Leonhard learned as a player influenced his approach to building the Bills' defense this offseason. Rather than focusing solely on an opponent's strengths, he will structure the game plans based on his players' strengths and weaknesses. And as they use camp to shorten his menus of plays, Leonhard is leaning on Bishop for insight. The Bills' play caller wants to know Bishop's preferences. He earned that ownership through his play in 19 starts in 25. Cole is such a good player, we should be talking about how we can tailor the system to him and make sure we put him in positions to succeed, Dana told the Buffalo News. Jim is a master at that. He played the position, he can look at a safety and know exactly what we need to do with him. Cole's in good hands. Bishop knows it too. The confidence the Bills' coaching staff inspires is like the feeling that he had learning under Sean McDermott and Bobby Babich. Both were very involved in Bishop's development. His ascent to becoming a reliable starter didn't happen right away, though. An injury during Bishop's first NFL training camp delayed his impact. The Bills still had him on the field for 19 games, including 3 high-stakes postseason matchups, but he started just 5 times as a rookie. The plays Bishop made in year 2 were not the only reason why Leonhard expressed excitement to work with him. Bishop was among the safeties Leonhard studied ahead of the 24 draft, shortly after he joined the Denver Broncos as defensive back coach and pass game coordinator. Bishop's versatility, which will give Leonhard the freedom to use the Bills' safeties in different areas of the field. Bishop can excel playing near the box or at a deep safety. His comfort at both is particularly important if Gardner-Johnson isn't ready for Week 1, because the safety starting next to Bishop does not necessarily need to be excellent near the line of scrimmage and deep in the secondary. Last season, Bishop totaled 85 tackles, 7 passes defended, and 3 interceptions. According to Pro Football Focus, Bishop allowed a reception on 61.1% of his targets, the 10th best mark for a safety who played at least 50% of his team's defensive snaps. He had 2 sacks in the regular season and 2 tackles for a loss during the playoffs. A minor injury kept him off the field this spring, but the Bills did not view his status as detrimental to building the defense. It was actually beneficial. There was more time for Bishop and Leonhard to engage in one-on-one conversations. Bishop could learn the playbook without spending energy competing in practices. It just prevented him from working on pre-snap communication with his teammates, specifically Gardner Johnson and Stone. That was the number one thing. I tried to turn the situation that we had in the offseason into a really positive one, Leonard said. This defense will free him up. And I was always a Swiss Army knife that kind of did a lot of different things. And that's what I like my safety group to be. There are going to be a lot of different roles and a lot of different positions and techniques they're asked to do. And that fits Cole Bishop's play style and his personality very well. The new defense may require Bishop to cover more wide receivers man-to-man. He has shown that he can shadow a tight end, as he did Monday during practice when he broke up Josh Allen's pass intended for Dawson Knox in the red zone. The more comfortable Bishop becomes within Leonard's defense, the less thinking he will do before the snap. It should help Bishop in an area that he and the Bills must improve if they are going to be better in 26. The Bills need to stop the run. Among qualifying safeties last season, Bishop's 11 missed tackles were tied with several others for second most. It is a flawed statistic because of the way PFF records missed tackles and decides who was responsible for a run's defense mistakes. But it illustrates that it is a potential growth area for Bishop. He and everyone else on the Bills' defense need to be more sound and disciplined with their pursuit angles and tackling. Amen. They allowed 65 runs of 10-plus yards, second most in the NFL, and they ranked 30th in yards allowed per carry, 5.1. It's nearly impossible for an NFL defense to get to the quarterback if it can't stop the run.
And let's look into some notes. Safety's injury not as serious as feared. For a portion of Saturday, the Buffalo Bills and their fans feared the worst for safety C.J. Gardner Johnson, who left practice on a cart. But upon learning that it was a calf strain rather than an Achilles tear, Bills head coach Joe Brady was able to breathe a sigh of relative relief. We're fortunate, Brady said. Anytime you see a lower body extremity injury, and in the manner in which some of those happen, there's always a bad possibility with it, right? But we got good news, and we'll see how his body recovers. As you guys know, with his personality, he's in a good place. Excited for him. He'll be ready for practice. He'll be back out there with the team. Brady would not put a timetable on Gardner Johnson's return, noting that every person's body is different. Gardner Johnson was not present on the sideline during Monday's rainy practice. Start of pads. Sort of. Monday marked the first time this training camp that the Bills put on their pads, at least for a little bit. Actually, the intent of the practice today is we're going to be in pads to start, and then when we get to the team periods, we're going to take the pads off, Brady said before practice. And it's part of the ramp-up period. And part of it is I've always been bothered by coming out first day of pads and everyone's just adjusting and kind of thinking about all the pads as opposed to the detail, the physicality, and the mindset of how we want to practice. The Bills did indeed go through individual drills and some 7-on-7 work before taking off the pads for the remainder of their practice. Brady said this was not something he ever did as a player, but from his mental notes over the years of things that could improve practice. Players, while excited to get padded football, appreciated the thought process from their first-year head coach. Yeah, I think it's something that not many people would think about, tight end Dawson Knox said. Brady really tries to see most things from the player's perspective, which we really appreciate because he really does take into account how we might think or how we might feel. Pettis ramps up. After a successful worker, the Bills signed wide receiver Dante Pettis on the second day of training camp. Pettis, who entered the league as the second-round pick of the 49ers, joins his fifth team since 2018. He missed 2023 with an injury. I've been on a lot of different teams. It's my 9th year, so I feel like I've learned a lot over my last couple seasons, Pettis told the Buffalo News. I feel like I can get open, make some plays, and be a difference maker. Pettis has played 66 games with 19 starts in his NFL career. He's obviously a vet, Brady said Monday. From that perspective, he can play in a special teams role, punt return, gunner. He plays wide receiver. He played for a long time. I remember him coming out and had a really good workout. Dante echoed that he could find a role on special teams. Last season, with the Saints, he had 127 yards on 9 catches across 8 games. While he's still ramping up with the Bills, he sees some early things he likes about the organization. You can tell it's a really close group, which is cool to see. And they come out here and work, and that shows over the last couple of years how well they've done. And I am so excited to be part of that. Finally, happy birthday, Marv.
Yay.
Former Bills head coach and Wall of Famer Marv Levy celebrated his 101st birthday on Monday. Brady has revered Levy since college. Marv Levy. He has William and Mary ties as well. So you can go back to William and Mary days, Brady said. You walk into that building every single day and you saw a picture of him on the wall and the success that he had there. I had an opportunity to get the job to talk to him, and he's given me wisdom, which is unbelievable. 101. I'm just hoping to get to 37, so he's just as sharp as it gets. As the rain pelted the media tent, Brady remarked how Marv always pushed his team to have the edge in the weather, a mantra that holds true today. There might be a couple of head coaches that have been since him, but the mindset and the mentality of our football goals, the organization, the ship that he led, is not going to change, Brady said. Happy birthday, Marv.
Happy birthday. That's incredible. 101 years. So what do you think we should see when Eric is advising people these days?
I don't know.
Let's see. Dear Eric, this question may be way off base, but is there a way to find out if a celebration of life is going to be held? A very dear friend passed away last fall and was laid to rest. Sadly, nobody contacted me as to when the burial was because I had to move from our home. I'm trying to move on, but closure may be affecting me. I have no ill will against anyone. I just want to know if there is a gathering coming up. I'm probably grasping at straws here, but thank you for listening. Signed, Sad and Missing Him. Dear Missing Him, I'm sorry for the loss of your friend. Funerals and celebrations of life can help us to start to find closure when we're in grief. Without them, the grief can be harder to navigate. This isn't to say it will always be there or that you don't have any options. However, first, reach out to your friends to find out if there is a gathering planned or if there is a gathering planned or if there was already a gathering. If there's a program or a video or a remembrance website, you can visit to share your feelings and memories of the deceased. It's not inappropriate to ask, especially since you've moved away. People will understand that you're trying to process your grief and honor your friend. If there isn't something planned, consider planning something yourself. It doesn't have to be large. It could be as simple as having friends over to your place or meeting in a park or coffee shop and sharing stories about your friend. Community and commemoration are the most important aspects here. It doesn't have to be formal. It just has to be an opportunity for you and your friends to feel less alone as you process your grief. Dear Eric, I have a friend who is generally wonderful and well-meaning, but can be an exasperating conversationalist. She's rather full of herself, her activities, her opinions, her experiences, her history, and loves to talk endlessly about all things her. She is intense, goes on, adds unnecessary details, and hardly takes a breath. She is either terrible at reading the room or simply doesn't care. In addition, but related, she is only interested in other people's lives or activities so that she can give her opinion on the same. So again, it becomes about her. What are some things I can do to stop this behavior without making her hurt or mad? Signed, Conversation Conundrum. Dear Conversation, you might start from a place of assuming she doesn't realize what she's doing. It could be an issue with attention or an eagerness to entertain that's going sideways. In that case, you could point it out gently when it happens. You've been talking about X for a bit. I'd like to share something. Can we switch gears? Gauge her response to redirects like this. She may be happy to talk about something else with you, or she might be resistant to it. If that's the case, you might need to be more direct. It will be more effective to talk about her habits in the context of your friendship rather than casting a wide net over her behavior with everyone. Have a conversation about how the two of you talk and what aspects of it you want to be different. Go in with suggestions that are proactive, like, it would mean a lot if you could ask me about X more. Do you think you could do that? Part of this may simply be how she's built, but if it's rubbing you the wrong way, it's good to say something so that you can maintain the friendship without hard feelings. She may not totally change her ways in every conversation, but that's not your job to fix. What you can work on is the way that you two communicate so that you both feel heard. Dear Eric, just wanted to share a resource with you for grief support for survivors of suicide in reference to the letter from confused and grieving daughter who lost her mother to suicide. And the website is Heartbeat, and it's https://www.heart-beatsurvivorsaftersuicide.org/. And it's an organization that offers group support as well as other resources. If a person seeking help isn't ready to attend the meetings, the resource tab offers literature that I found comforting during the grief process of my brother's suicide. Best wishes, and thank you for all you do. Signed, Walking Life's Journey.
It could be that dash was because it was at the end of the line.
Yeah, I'm thinking that too, yeah.
It's probably one word, Heartbeat Survivors After Suicide.org.
Okay. Dear Journey, I'm sorry for the loss of your brother, and I appreciate this resource. Heartbeat is one of a number of very helpful organizations to which people can turn when grieving a loved one. Other survivors of suicide will surely benefit from knowing they're not alone and can find comfort in healing.
And let's look at Heloise, because she's talking about testing a basement for dampness. Does that apply to Buffalo right now?
Yeah, I think it does.
Dear Heloise, my husband and I decided to remodel our basement and use it as a Hobby Crafts half-bath extra TV room where our teenagers and their friends can enjoy themselves, or where we can gather as a family to watch movies. Because my dad was a builder all his life and knew what to look for and how to do things, we asked him how we should test for dampness. There are kits that you can buy, but he likes an old-fashioned method where we save plastic dry cleaning bags, cut them into 14-inch squares, and tape them to the walls. We taped all around the edges so that the air couldn't get in or out. After 6 days, we reached in to test for moisture on the plastic and the wall surface. We found dampness in only one part of the basement and took steps to seal off the wall to avoid any problems. That was 10 years ago, and we still have a dry basement. Vacation planning. My husband and I used to argue over where we would vacation every year. In fact, it was the only thing we argued about. We sat down and figured out a system, and it's since stopped the annual fight. One year, he picks the place we'll go, and the next year I pick the place. I told him I had 3 stipulations. First, no camping trips. I refuse to live in a tent. I want a hot shower and a comfy bed. A second no-no was that we wouldn't keep going to the same place every year. 4 years had to pass before we went to a place that we had already been to. The third stipulation was that we wouldn't complain about the other's choice. Instead, we'd keep an open mind and make an effort to enjoy the place. We've been to many exciting places and made friends all over the world. It was the best decision that we ever made. That's a cool idea.
Yeah, it is.
Using starch to apply fabric. Dear Heloise, I was told that starch could be used to apply fabric to the wall. If so, how is it done? Kathy from Warwick, Massachusetts. Kathy, it's actually easy to do. Clean the wall where you want to apply the fabric. Make sure the fabric is lightweight and it must be smooth. Remove all outlets that are covered by a switch plate. This isn't an ideal project for velvet or other heavy fabrics. Wash and iron your fabric panels, leaving a 1 to 2 inch excess on all sides. Temporarily pin or tack the panels to the wall at the top. Then coat the wall by using a roller and putting liquid starch in a paint tray. Use a heavy coating of the starch, working in 3-foot sections. Smooth out the fabric by using your hand or a squeegee to get rid of bumps and air bubbles. Once the entire panel is on the wall, roll the liquid starch onto the surface of the panel. After the fabric is saturated with starch, just trim off the excess.
Interesting. That is interesting.
Yeah. I
You
have
know-
one little thing here.
Let me just say this. Okay, this day in history, Louis Armstrong was born in New Orleans, and he dropped out of school in the 5th grade and went to work for the Karnofsky family, which allowed him to buy his first coronet.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing? Okay, now you can go.
I was just looking at Family Circus and little Billy standing there with his hands behind his back. It looks like he's got a newspaper and he's looking up and he says, "About how many rungs are there on the ladder of success?" That's quite the question to contemplate, I would say.
Especially at that age, I would
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
And in 1958, the year I was born, the Billboard published its first Hot 100. At the top, guess what it was? Poor Little Fool by Ricky Nelson. I wonder if my parents felt that way. And you have been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Tuesday, August 4th. We read from the Buffalo News live on weekday and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. and rebroadcast at 4 p.m. For more information, you can call us at 716-821-5555. Your readers today have been
Lori and
Lita. Thanks for listening. Take care. And as always, keep smiling.
have a great rest of your day.
If you or people you know shop at any of the Dash's supermarkets, please save Dash's register tapes for radio reading. Our agency receives $2 for every $100 in Dash's register tapes. Radio Reading has raised thousands of dollars so far. Anyone can drop off their Dash's tapes to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Or Dash's tapes can be mailed to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, New York, 14227. Any questions on Dash's tapes for radio reading? Call us at 716-821-5555, and thanks for caring. program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability